She stood alone on that platform while the whole town laughed, blood dripping from her palms where she'd held on too hard to what was left of her dignity. The last one. The one nobody wanted. I was off my horse before I knew what I was doing. "This one," I said. "We're going." Silence. Complete. Like the whole world stopped breathing. That September morning in 1882, I made a choice that everyone said would destroy me. Instead, it built an empire. This is how it happened. You know, I've been watching people make choices for the better part of 70 years now. And I can tell you this, the moments that truly matter don't announce themselves with fanfare. They creep up quiet, like on an ordinary Tuesday, maybe when the sun's beating down and you're just trying to get through another day. That September morning in 1882, standing on my dying ranch in Millerton, Texas, I learned something about the difference between surviving and actually living. The good Lord works in mysterious ways, they say. And I reckon that's true. But sometimes His mysteries look an awful lot like two broken people finding each other when the whole world's turned its back. This here's the story of how I, Nathan Cross, chose the woman nobody wanted, and how that choice built an empire from ashes. The rooster woke me before dawn, same as every morning for the past 3 years. 4:30 by the pocket watch Kate had given me on our wedding day. I didn't need to look at it anymore. My body knew the rhythm of failure as sure as it knew the seasons. I lay there in the darkness of that bedroom listening to the house settle around me. Every creak was a reminder. Every groan of wood was Kate's voice still haunting these walls. The baby's cries I'd never heard still echoed in the silence. Some men drank to forget. I worked until my hands bled, worked until exhaustion dragged me under, worked until the guilt couldn't find me in my dreams. Didn't always work. I rolled out of bed, boots hitting the floor with the same hollow thud they'd made for 1,000 mornings. The window showed me what I already knew. My ranch, all 160 acres of it, spread out in the pre-dawn gray like a corpse laid out for burial. The house needed paint. The barn needed half its boards replaced. The fences sagged like old men too tired to stand straight anymore. And I was just one man, 32 years old, but feeling 50, trying to hold it all together with spit and stubbornness. The coffee was yesterday's grounds boiled again. Tasted like dirt and regret, but it was hot and it was caffeine, and that was enough. I stood at the kitchen window, cup warming my hands, and did the math I'd been avoiding for months. 160 acres. 50 head of cattle maybe if I could find the strays that had wandered off while I was fixing fence on the North 40, chickens that barely laid because I kept forgetting to feed them, a garden plot that had gone to seed 2 summers running because who had time to weed when the water pump was broken and the barn roof was leaking and the whole damn enterprise was circling the drain Kate had tried. Lord knows she tried. But she was a banker's daughter from Dallas, raised on piano lessons and French and needlepoint. She'd come out here expecting something from a dime novel. Cowboys and adventure and romance under the big Texas sky. What she got was dirt. Endless, choking, soul-crushing dirt. Dirt in the house no matter how many times she swept. Dirt in the food, dirt in the water, dirt in her hair and her clothes and her dreams. She'd painted flowers on the bedroom walls to make it prettier. Little yellow roses, her specialty. They were still there, faded now, mocking me with their cheerfulness. Every morning I woke up alone. The pregnancy had been her last hope. Our last hope. A baby would give meaning to the suffering, she'd said. A baby would make it all worthwhile. I'd built a cradle. Spent 2 months carving flowers into the headboard to match the ones on the walls. Yellow roses for the daughter she was sure we'd have. Rose she wanted to name her. Little Rose Cross, growing up strong and free under the Texas sun. The labor started 2 months early. False pains, Kate said. Just false pains, don't worry, don't waste money on the doctor. By the time I realized it wasn't false, by the time I understood that something was terribly, horribly wrong, it was too late. 20 miles to the nearest doctor. Spring rains had turned the roads to rivers of mud. My horse went lame, halfway there, stepped in a gopher hole and shattered his foreleg. I had to shoot him, find another horse, lose another hour. 5 hours total. 5 hours while Kate labored alone except for Mrs. Henley from the neighboring ranch, A good woman, but no midwife, no doctor, just a kind soul doing her best. When I got back with the physician, Kate was barely conscious. The baby was stuck. Had been stuck for hours, the doctor said later. Nothing to be done by then. Nothing but watch and wait and pray, though I've never been much good at praying. The baby came out silent, never drew a single breath, never opened her eyes, never got to be Rose. Kate held on another day, long enough to see what we'd lost, long enough to blame herself, to apologize over and over through cracked lips and fever dreams, long enough to tell me with her last bit of strength to find someone stronger. Not "I love you," not "remember me," not even "goodbye." Just find someone stronger. I buried them together. Dug both graves myself, wouldn't let anyone help. Put the cradle I'd built between them in the ground, because what the hell else was I supposed to do with it? Mrs. Henley tried to stop me, said it was wasteful, said I could use it for the next one. There wasn't going to be a next one. For 3 years I'd kept that promise. No wife, no woman, no risk of watching someone else die, because I'd brought them to this God-forsaken piece of hard-scrabble Texas dirt. The ranch deteriorated. So did I. We deserved each other, I figured. Both of us dying slow, both of us too stubborn to just give up and blow away. But a man can only do so much alone. That was the cold truth I'd been avoiding, the calculation I'd refused to make. This ranch needed 2 people. One to work the cattle and maintain the fences. One to manage the house and the garden and the chickens and the 1,000 other tasks that kept a homestead running. One person couldn't do both. I'd proven that for 3 years running. So 2 months ago, in a moment of weakness or clarity or desperation, I'd sent away for a mail-order bride, wrote out an advertisement, paid the fee to the bride agent in town, and waited for the date when the women would arrive at the depot. Today. The women were arriving today, and I'd already decided not to go. Standing in my kitchen with that bitter coffee, watching the sun creep over the horizon and light up all my failures in gold and shadow. I knew I couldn't do it again. Couldn't bring another woman out here to break and die. Kate had been delicate, sure, but was that really why she'd failed? Or was it this place, this ranch that demanded everything and gave back just enough to keep you hoping, keep you trying, keep you dying by inches? I poured the coffee grounds out, scattered them for the chickens I'd forgotten to feed again yesterday. They came running, squawking their accusations, and I threw them some dried corn to shut them up. The rooster fixed me with one beady eye like he knew, like he could see right through me to the coward underneath. Find someone stronger, Kate had said. But stronger than what? Stronger than her, stronger than me, stronger than this land that crushed everyone who tried to tame it. I saddled my horse a bay gelding named Red because I'd never been creative with names. The plan was to ride the fence line check for breaks, maybe find those strayed cattle. The plan was definitely not to ride into town, definitely not to show up at that depot, definitely not to pick some poor woman out of a lineup like I was buying livestock. That was the plan. But plans, I've learned, are just ways to make God laugh. I was 2 miles from the house checking a section of fence that had gone saggy when I saw the dust cloud rising from town. Even from a distance, I could see the crowd gathering at the depot, like vultures circling a dying animal drawn by the spectacle of it. Mail-order brides arriving was apparently the entertainment event of the season. I should have turned around, should have ridden the opposite direction, gotten back to work, forgotten the whole fool idea. Instead, I found myself turning red toward town. Just curiosity, I told myself. Just wanted to see what the fuss was about. Not planning to participate, just planning to watch. Lies we tell ourselves are sometimes the most dangerous kind. The depot platform was packed by the time I arrived. I stayed back, didn't dismount, didn't join the crowd, just watched from maybe 50 yards out, close enough to see but far enough to feel separate from the circus. There were 10 women on that platform, 10 lives disrupted, 10 hopes pinned on finding a man desperate enough to marry a stranger. The bride agent, a slick-talking peacock named Silas Blackwood, was working the crowd like a carnival barker. Fine women here, everyone he called out his voice, carrying across the depot yard. Trained in the domestic arts. Let me introduce Miss Catherine from Pennsylvania. She can read, write, and cipher. A rancher with silver threading through his temples stepped forward, helped Miss Catherine down from the platform like she was made of glass. The blonde girl smiled, relief visible even from where I sat. She'd drawn a lucky hand. The old rancher looked kind, looked prosperous, looked like he'd treat her well. 1 down, 9 to go. The selection happened fast. Pretty girls went first, young ones, educated ones. Each time Blackwood introduced a woman, I could see the calculation happening in the men's eyes. What can she do? How much will she cost to keep? Will she last? Like buying a horse. Check the teeth. Check the temperament. Check the bloodlines. I counted them down. 10 became 8. 8 became 6. The remaining women standing a little straighter, smiling a little harder, desperation starting to show around the edges. 6 became 4. 4 became 2. And then there was 1. She stood at the end of the platform, had been standing there the whole time, and I realized I'd been watching her more than the others. Not because she was pretty, though she wasn't ugly. Not because she stood out, though, in her plainness among the peacocks. Maybe she did. No, I'd been watching her because while the other women had been smiling and posing and trying to catch men's eyes, this one had been looking at the horizon, like she was measuring the distance to somewhere else, like she was already planning her escape. She wore brown, practical brown that wouldn't show dirt. Her carpetbag sat at her feet light enough that I could tell it didn't hold much. Everything she owned in one small bag. The thought stuck with me like a burr. The crowd's mood was shifting. I could feel it even from where I sat. The laughter starting building. Someone near the platform said something I couldn't quite hear, but the tone was clear enough. Mockery. Judgment. The sound people make when they're grateful it's someone else standing in that particular circle of hell. Blackwood's face was red. He shuffled his papers, cleared his throat. Now, Miss Miller here, he started, and I noticed he didn't have a long list of accomplishments to rattle off. She's experienced in household management. More laughter. Louder this time. Experienced, someone called out. Yeah, experienced at getting returned. Can't keep a husband, another voice added. What makes you think she can keep a house? I watched her hands clench, watched blood well up where her nails bit into her palms. But she didn't flinch, didn't look down, didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. And something in my chest, something I'd thought Kate had killed and buried, turned over and drew breath. The laughter was swelling now, feeding on itself. Blackwood was sweating through his fancy suit, trying to salvage the situation, and failing. A few men near the front were making comments just loud enough to hear, speculating about what was wrong with her, why she was here a second time. What poor fool had been desperate enough to marry her before and smart enough to send her back? She stood through it all, spine straight, eyes on that horizon, hands bleeding, and I understood in that moment why I'd ridden to town. Kate had been beautiful. Kate had been refined. Kate had been everything a man was supposed to want in a wife, and she'd died trying to be something she wasn't. This woman standing alone on that platform, while the world laughed, she wasn't trying to be anything but what she was. And what she was still standing. I'd spent 3 years feeling sorry for myself, 3 years believing I'd killed Kate by bringing her somewhere she couldn't survive, 3 years thinking the ranch had beaten me. But here was a woman who'd already lost, already been rejected, already been told she wasn't good enough, and she was still standing. I nudged Red forward. Didn't think about it, didn't plan. It just moved. The crowd was so focused on their sport they didn't notice at first. Then someone saw me coming, nudged their neighbor, and the laughter started dying like a fire running out of fuel. People parted. They knew me. Nathan Cross, the man who'd buried his wife and baby 3 years back. The man who never smiled, never socialized, never showed up to town gatherings. The man whose ranch was failing and everyone knew it, but nobody talked about it to his face. They parted, and I rode right up to the base of that platform. I didn't look at her face, didn't want to see pity there or hope or calculation. Instead, I looked at her hands, at the blood dripping from her palms where she'd held on so hard to her dignity that she'd drawn blood. Blackwood was stammering something. Mr. Cross. I didn't think I wasn't aware you were looking for, but I cut him off. This one, I said. My voice sounded like gravel, rough from disuse. We're going. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the train hissing steam 2 platforms over, could hear the wind rattling through the depot's tin roof, could hear my own heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. The woman looked at me then, really looked, not with the desperate gratitude I'd expected, not with relief or joy or any of the things a woman should feel when she's rescued from public humiliation. She looked at me like she was sizing me up, like she was trying to figure out if I was an improvement or just a different kind of hell. I met her eyes, let her look, let her see whatever she needed to see. After a long moment, she picked up her carpet bag, walked to the edge of the platform. I didn't offer to help her down, just sat there on red waiting to see what she'd do. She climbed down herself, caught her boot in her skirts, halfway, nearly fell, but caught herself. Steadied, walked over to where I sat. "I can ride," she said. Her voice was rough too, like she'd been shouting, or like she'd spent a long time holding back screams. I jerked my head toward the back of the horse. She tied her bag to the saddle, put her foot where mine had been, and swung up behind me like she'd done it 1,000 times. The crowd was starting to murmur, starting to find their voices again. I heard Wade Harlan's voice somewhere in there saying something about damaged goods. Heard someone else laugh, then cut off sharp when I turned to look. I clicked my tongue at Red, and we started moving. We hadn't made it 100 yards before Blackwood came riding after us on a rented mare that looked about as happy to be doing this as I was. He cut across our path, forced me to stop. "Mr. Cross," he panted, mopping his forehead with a yellowed handkerchief. "I feel obligated to inform you of certain circumstances regarding Miss Miller's previous marriage." He had papers. Of course he had papers. Men like Blackwood always had papers. "Don't need to know," I said. "But sir, legally, I must disclose that she was returned due to." He glanced at the woman sitting behind me, due to certain physical limitations that prevented her from fulfilling. That is to say, she cannot have children. The medical documentation clearly states. I let him talk. Let him lay it all out for the crowd that had followed us, sensing more sport. Let him explain about the 3-year marriage, the lack of children, the doctor's verdict, the husband's decision to return her like she was a broken plow. Through it all, I felt her sitting behind me, felt her spine stiffen, felt her hands where they rested light on my sides for balance start to shake. When Blackwood finally ran down, I looked at him, really looked. Let the silence stretch until it got uncomfortable. "My house is already empty," I said finally. "Got a grave with 2 stones side by side. Empty nursery that'll never be filled. You think this woman's going to make that worse?" Blackwood's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "But sir, I'm only trying to protect your interest, to ensure you understand what you're taking on." "I know exactly what I'm taking on," I said. "Now move your horse." He didn't. Not right away. Tried one more time to save me from my own decision, or maybe just to cover his own liability. "Mr. Cross, she's damaged goods. No man wants a wife who can't give him heirs, who can't even—" I was off the horse before the words were fully out of his mouth. Didn't remember deciding to dismount, but there I was walking toward him with intent in every step. Blackwood's mare shied back, sensing what her rider should have sensed. "Damaged," I said. The word tasted wrong in my mouth, sharp edges cutting. "You want to talk about damaged? I've spent 3 years damaged. 3 years so broken I couldn't even keep the goddamn chickens fed." "You think I'm looking for perfect?" I grabbed his bridle, held his nervous mare steady, leaned in close enough that only he could hear. "I'm looking for someone strong enough to survive what's coming, someone who's already been tested by fire and didn't quit. You think I care if she can have children when the last one killed my wife?" Blackwood had gone pale. "Get your hand off my horse," he managed. I let go, stepped back. "Move," I said again. This time he moved. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. The woman behind me, Emma was her name I remembered from Blackwood's stammering, didn't ask questions, didn't make conversation, just held on light and let me think. The sun was climbing toward noon by the time we crested the rise that overlooked my land. I stopped Red there, let her see what she was getting into. Wanted to give her one last chance to change her mind before we crossed that invisible line between town and home. The house looked worse from this angle. The missing shingles stood out stark against the roof. The barn leaned like a drunk trying to stay upright. The garden was a tangle of weeds with a few struggling tomato plants trying to survive despite my neglect. 160 acres of failure spread out in the harsh noon light. I felt her shift behind me, tensing probably, getting ready to ask to go back. Can't say I'd blame her. This wasn't much of an improvement over standing on that platform. "Your place," she said finally. "Yeah," I said. Long pause. "Then I've seen worse." I almost smiled. Almost. "Where?" She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was careful. "Measured. Prison farm in East Texas. Worked there after my husband sent me back, before I saved enough for Blackwood's fee." I turned in the saddle to look at her. Her face was set, waiting for judgment. Prison farm was where they sent women with nowhere else to go. Women who'd broken laws or just been broken by life and needed to work off debts or crimes or the simple sin of being inconvenient. "What'd you do?" I asked. Her chin came up. "Tried to kill him. Your husband." She nodded. "Didn't succeed, obviously. But the trying was enough to get me 6 months at the farm. Cotton picking mostly. Some vegetable work. Learned field medicine there. Woman got her leg crushed by a plow horse. Doctor was 2 days away. We either learned fast or let her die." The calculation was happening in my head even as she spoke. This wasn't some delicate banker's daughter. This was someone who'd picked cotton in the Texas heat, who'd saved a woman's life with improvised medicine, who'd tried to kill a man who probably deserved it and done time for the attempt. This was someone strong enough to survive. "Why'd you try to kill him?" I asked. "Beat me when I couldn't get pregnant," she said simply. "Said I was worthless. Figured if I was going to hell anyway, might as well send him first." She paused. "Only got him in the shoulder, though. Poor aim." This time I did smile. Just a little. Just enough that she saw. "Probably for the best," I said. "Killing's harder to come back from than attempted killing. That's what the judge said." She shifted again and I turned back around. "This the part where you decide I'm too dangerous and take me back. This is the part where I show you the house," I said. "And you decide if you're staying." I nudged Red forward. Felt her arms tighten slightly around my middle as we started down the slope. Not scared, I didn't think. Just holding on for the ride. The house was worse up close. I'd stopped seeing it clearly after Kate died, stopped noticing the accumulation of neglect. But walking Emma through the door, seeing it through fresh eyes, the reality hit hard. The kitchen was a disaster. Dishes from 3 days ago still sitting in the wash basin. Coffee grounds scattered across the table where I'd been too tired to care. The floor needed sweeping so bad there was actual dirt tracked in patterns from door to stove to table and back. Emma set her bag down carefully, looked around with the same measuring gaze she'd used on me at the depot. "Stove work?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Damper sticks sometimes, but it'll heat." She walked to it, checked the firebox, tested the damper with practiced efficiency, moved to the pump at the sink, worked the handle until water came out rusty, then clear. Checked under the sink for leaks. Opened cupboards, inventoried what supplies I had, which wasn't much. "Through here." She pointed at the door to the lean-to room I'd built. I nodded. She pushed it open, stood in the doorway looking at what I'd made. A single iron bedstead with a corn shuck mattress. A washstand with a chipped basin. Hooks on the wall for clothes. A small window with flour sack curtains I'd hung myself, though they hung crooked and I'd never bothered to fix them. And the lock. She saw it right away. Checked the bolt on the inside of the door, then checked the one on the outside, the one that would let me lock myself in my room if she needed the space. Her fingers traced over the metal like she was reading Braille. "You built this?" she asked. "Last month," I said from the doorway. "Figured whoever answered that advertisement would want privacy." She turned to look at me. "Really look. This wasn't on your original house plan." "No. You built it after you sent for a bride. Before you knew who was coming." "Yeah." "Why?" The question hung there between us. I could have said something practical. Could have talked about propriety or expectations or any of the lies men tell themselves about why they do things. Instead, I told the truth. Because Kate didn't have a choice, I said. Didn't have anywhere that was just hers, separate from me and what I needed. Thought whoever came this time should have that option. Emma's hand dropped from the lock. She looked at me for a long moment, and I couldn't read what was happening behind her eyes. "Thank you," she said finally. I nodded, gestured toward the main bedroom. "That's mine. You saw the kitchen. There's a parlor we never use. You can do what you want with it. Chickens are out back, barns beyond that. Cattle are out to pasture what's left of them. What happened to the rest, straight off. I've been meaning to round them up, but there's only so much one man can do." She nodded, like that made perfect sense, set her bag on the bed in the lean-to. When she came back out, she was rolling up her sleeves. "I'll start with the kitchen," she said. "You'll want dinner when you come in tonight. What time? 6 usually. Sometimes later if there's trouble. I'll have it ready." I stood there not quite sure what to do next. This was the part where I should probably establish rules, set expectations, explain how things would work. But she'd already started pumping water, already started cleaning like she owned the place. "Emma," I said. She turned hands wet, waiting. "This is work," I said. "Not marriage, not really. We share the labor, share the house, but that's all we're sharing. You understand?" "I understand," she said. "The lean-to is yours as long as you want it. I won't come in without permission. Won't expect you to." I gestured vaguely toward my bedroom. "Won't expect anything beyond the work." She dried her hands on her skirt. "What do you expect from the work?" "Cooking, cleaning, garden when we get it planted, chickens, preserving. All the house things I've been letting slide. I can do that, and I'll handle the cattle, the fencing, the heavy repairs. We split it down the middle. You pull your weight, I pull mine. Fair enough?" She paused. "What if I can't do something? What if I fail?" The question caught me off guard. "Then you tell me," I said, "and we figure it out together. I'm not your husband, Emma. I'm not going to beat you for being human." Her shoulders relaxed just slightly. "Good," she said, "because I'm done being beaten." We stood there in that ruined kitchen, two damaged people making a bargain that made sense to neither of us, but somehow felt right anyway. The sun coming through the window caught the dust in the air, made it look almost golden, almost beautiful. "Then get to work," I said, and went back outside before things could get any more complicated than they already were. The rest of that first day set the pattern for what came next. I worked outside checking fences and searching for strayed cattle, only finding 3 of the 15 I'd lost. Emma worked inside, and by the time I came back at sunset, the transformation was startling. The kitchen was clean, actually clean. The floor swept, the dishes washed, and stacked the table scrubbed down to bare wood. There was a pot on the stove that smelled like beans and salt pork and actual cornbread cooling on the sideboard. She was standing at the pump when I walked in, washing her own hands, her hair falling out of its pins, and her dress dusty from work. She turned when she heard me, and I saw the uncertainty in her face. The question of whether she'd done enough, done it right, earned her keep for one more day. "Looks good," I said, and watched the tension bleed out of her shoulders. We ate in silence. The food was plain but well made, and my God, it was hot and fresh, and I hadn't realized how tired I was of my own terrible cooking. She served me first, then herself, with portions that told me she was used to making food stretch farther than it wanted to go. After dinner, I went out to the porch. It was my habit sitting there in the cooling dark, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the cattle lowing in the distance, the chickens settling in their coop, the wind moving through the scrub grass like breath. Emma came out too after she'd finished cleaning up. Didn't ask if she could join me, just sat on the opposite end of the porch with some mending she'd found in Kate's old sewing basket. We sat there together, not talking, not touching, just existing in the same space while the stars came out one by one. This became our rhythm. This became our life. By the end of the first week, I'd stopped thinking of her as the mail-order bride, stopped thinking of her as Emma Miller, returned wife. She was just Emma. The woman who could make coffee strong enough to strip paint and bread light enough to float. The woman who'd reorganized my barn without asking because my system was inefficient. The woman who'd set a broken chicken's leg with splints made from kindling and patience. The woman who was still here. On the 7th day, Wade Harlan came to visit. I was working on the north fence when I saw the dust from his approach. Knew it was him even before I could make out the horse. Wade rode a flashy Palomino that cost more than my entire cattle herd, and he wanted everyone to know it. I kept working on the fence didn't give him the satisfaction of stopping. He rode up close, sat there on that expensive horse, looking down at me like I was something stuck to his boot. "Cross," he said by way of greeting. "Heard you took yourself a wife." "Word travels," I said, not looking up from the wire I was splicing. "Sure does in a town this size." He shifted in his saddle leather, creaking. "Especially when the wife in question is the one nobody else wanted." I stopped working then. Straightened up slow, met his eyes. "You got a point to make, Harlan, or you just here to waste my time?" He smiled. Wade Harlan's smile was all teeth and no warmth, like a skull grinning. "Just being neighborly," he said. "Checking in on how things are going. This drought's been hard on all of us. We've managed. Have you, though?" His gaze swept over my property, and I could see him cataloging every failing, every broken fence, every missing shingle, every sign that I was hanging on by my fingernails. That's a mighty big place for one man to work, even with help. "I've got help now," I said. "That's what I heard. Mail order bride from the depot." He leaned forward in his saddle. "Must have been desperate cross, taking on another man's leavings like that." My hands tightened on the wire cutters. "Say what you came to say, Harlan." He sat back, that smile never wavering. "I'm saying that if things get too hard, if that new wife of yours doesn't work out any better than the last one, my offer still stands. I'll buy this place, give you a fair price, save you the trouble of watching it die slow." "Not selling." "Yet," Wade said. "Not selling yet. But a woman who can't even give you children." Cross. What's the point? You'll work yourself to death for what? To leave it all to nobody. The wire cutters were biting into my palms. I made myself open my hands, let them hang loose at my sides. "I don't recall asking for your opinion on my wife or my ranch," I said. "So unless you've got actual business, I suggest you move along." Wade's smile finally faded. He looked at me with something uglier than contempt. Pity, maybe. Or calculation. "You're going to fail," he said flatly. "This place requires 2 strong people, and you've got you and her. One good wind and it's all over. When it happens, when you finally admit you can't hack it, I'll still be here. Still willing to buy. Still waiting for me to fail, you mean?" He shrugged. "Call it what you want. I call it good business." He wheeled his Palomino around, started to ride off, then stopped, turned back. "One more thing, Cross. That woman you brought out here, watch her close. Desperate people do desperate things. Would be a shame if something happened to make your situation even worse. Is that a threat, Harlan?" "Just neighborly advice," he said, and rode off before I could respond. I stood there watching him go, the wire cutters still in my hand, trying to control the rage boiling up my throat. Wade Harlan had been trying to buy my land for 2 years, ever since he'd bought out the Jacobson place to the north and started building his empire. My water rights were the prize, the creek that ran through my property and fed into his. If he controlled the water, he could expand his herd, grow his operation, become the cattle king he dreamed of being. And he'd been so sure I'd fail. So certain that Kate's death had broken me past fixing. For 3 years he'd watched and waited, dropping by every few months to renew his offer, to remind me that the easy way out was just a signature away. Now I had Emma. Now things were starting just barely to turn around, and Wade knew it, could see it, was threatened by it, which meant he was going to do something about it. I finished the fence work and headed back to the house at sunset. Emma was on the porch rifle across her lap, staring in the direction Wade had ridden. She didn't lower the gun when she saw me coming, and I realized she'd been watching the whole encounter. "Friend of yours?" she asked as I dismounted. "Neighbor," I said. "Wade Harlan. Owns the spread to the north. Wants to own this one, too." She nodded slowly. "He the one who set that fire last week?" "Probably. Can't prove it, but it's his style. Start a problem offer to solve it. make himself look generous while weakening everyone around him. She was quiet for a moment, still watching the horizon. "He came by here while you were out yesterday," she said. My gut clenched. What did he want, same as today probably, to see what he was dealing with? Her mouth tightened. Brought two of his hands with him. They had some questions about whether I was settling in all right, whether I was happy, whether I might want to reconsider my options. I felt cold despite the heat. "They touch you, no." She finally lowered the rifle. I was holding this. Made it clear I knew how to use it. They got the message. The rage from earlier flared hotter. "I should have killed him," I said. Emma came to stand beside me, looked me square in the eye. "Then you'd hang," she said, "and he'd buy this land at auction for pennies. Is that what you want?" "No." "Then be smarter than him." She touched my arm just briefly, light enough I could have imagined it. "We make this place work. We succeed. That's the revenge that matters." She went inside, left me standing there with the taste of bile in my mouth and the knowledge that she was right. Wade wanted me to do something stupid, wanted me to give him an excuse, a reason to have me arrested, or worse. Going after him directly would just play into his hands. But watching Emma walk away, seeing the set of her shoulders, and remembering the rifle across her lap, I understood something new about the situation we were in. This wasn't just about saving a failing ranch anymore. This was about proving that we, the broken and discarded, could build something that lasted, could take what Wade thought was worthless and turn it into something he couldn't touch, couldn't buy, couldn't destroy. That night, after a dinner that felt heavier with meaning than before, I sat on the porch watching Emma work through Kate's old sewing basket. She didn't ask questions about Kate, didn't pry into the past, just worked in companionable silence while the night sounds of the ranch settled around us. I thought about Wade's words about his threats and his certainty that we'd fail. Thought about the woman sitting across from me mending a shirt with hands that knew hard work, hands that had survived things that would have broken softer people. "Tomorrow I'll teach you to work the cattle," I said. "If we're going to make this place survive, you need to know how to do more than housework." She looked up from her mending. "I can do that. And we need to talk about Wade, about what his threats mean, what he might try." "I know what he'll try," Emma said. "I've dealt with men like him before. They test you, push to see where you'll break. But we don't break Nathan. That's our advantage." She went to her room a while later, and I heard the bolt slide home. Not keeping me out, I didn't think. Just a habit, a comfort, a reminder that she had control over something in this uncertain world. I sat there alone, thinking about Kate and Emma and the difference between them. Kate had been what I thought I wanted. Emma was what I actually needed. Kate had tried to change herself to fit the ranch. Emma was already shaped by hardship into exactly what this life required. Tomorrow would bring more work, more fences to mend, more cattle to find more of Wade Harlan's schemes to counter. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, I went to bed thinking that maybe, just maybe, this ranch had a future after all. And that maybe I did too. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm of work and silence. Emma and I moved around each other like dancers learning new steps, careful not to collide, careful not to get too close. She handled the house and the chickens with an efficiency that shamed my 3 years of bachelor chaos. I worked the cattle and the fences, and slowly, grudgingly, the ranch started remembering what it felt like to be managed by 2 people instead of one exhausted man. But good things don't last, not in my experience. And October brought with it a problem I'd been avoiding thinking about: the cattle drive. Every year come October, the ranchers in our part of Texas drove their herds to the stockyards in Fort Worth. 40 miles of rough country, 5 days round trip if you were lucky, and the only real income most of us would see all year. Miss the drive, and you were stuck trying to sell locally for pennies on the dollar or waiting until spring when the prices would be even worse. I'd made the drive alone the past 2 years. Lost cattle both times, barely broke even after expenses. But what choice did I have? Stay home and starve, or risk it and maybe starve slightly slower? This year was different. This year, I had Emma. And leaving her alone for 5 days while Wade Harlan circled like a vulture waiting for me to die, that didn't sit right. but taking her along. A cattle drive wasn't Sunday church. It was sleeping on hard ground, eating beans 3 meals a day, pushing ornery cattle through creek crossings and rough terrain while praying they didn't spook and scatter. I was still chewing on the problem when Emma solved it for me. I was in the barn checking the saddles and gear I'd need for the drive when I heard her footsteps behind me. She'd learned to walk quiet, but I'd learned to listen for her. "When do we leave?" she asked. I turned to find her standing in the barn doorway backlit by afternoon sun. For the cattle drive. When do we leave?" "You're not going," I said. "Why not?" "Because it's not for women. Because it's dangerous. Because I'd been running scenarios in my head for 3 days and none of them ended with her safe." She walked into the barn, picked up one of the saddles, tested its weight. "I can ride," she said. "I can shoot. I can keep up." What part of that sounds like not for women? You ever been on a cattle drive? No. But I've picked cotton for 12 hours straight in Texas summer. I've slept on the ground with scorpions for bedmates. I've worked through pain that would put most men on their backs. Her eyes met mine, level and calm. "Try me." I wanted to say no. Wanted to keep her safe back at the ranch where Wade's men might come calling, where she'd be alone and vulnerable, and everything could go wrong in ways I couldn't control. But that was the problem. Wasn't it? I couldn't control any of it. Not her safety here, not the drive, not Wade Harlan's schemes. All I could control was whether we faced it together or apart. "Can you be ready by sunup tomorrow?" I asked. She smiled. It was a small thing, that smile, but it changed her whole face, made her look younger, less haunted. "I'm already ready," she said. That night I lay in bed trying to convince myself I wasn't making a terrible mistake. The last woman I'd taken into dangerous territory had died. But Emma wasn't Kate. Wasn't delicate, wasn't unsuited to this life. She'd already proven she could handle hardship. Still, the knowing didn't make the fear go away. We left at dawn with 50 head of cattle, everything I had that was market ready. No hired hands, couldn't afford them. Just Emma and me and Red and the horse I'd bought for her last week, a sturdy mare named Belle who'd belonged to the widow Morrison before she died. Emma sat Belle like she'd been born to it. I'd tested her the day before, had her ride out with me to check the east fence line. She kept up without complaint, didn't fall off when Belle shied at a rattlesnake, handled herself with the kind of quiet competence that made me wonder what other skills she'd picked up in that hard-scrabble life of hers. The cattle moved slow, which was good. Fast cattle were panicked cattle, and panicked cattle scattered. We kept them at an easy pace, me riding point to set direction. Emma on flank, keeping the stragglers moving. The sun climbed hot and merciless, turning the scrub grass gold and the sky that pale washed-out blue that meant no rain coming. Around mid-morning, a rider appeared on the ridge to our east. Too far to make out features, but I knew the posture. Wade Harlan watching, making sure I saw him watching. Emma saw him too. She rode up alongside me, shading her eyes against the glare. "Friend of yours?" she asked, and there was dark humor in her voice. "Said he'd be interested in my cattle," I told her. "Offered to buy them here, save me the trouble of the drive." "At what price?" "Half of market value." She snorted. "Generous of him." That's Wade, always looking out for his neighbors. The rider on the ridge hadn't moved, just sat there like a carrion bird waiting for something to die. "He wants me to fail," I said. "Wants this drive to go wrong so I'll be desperate enough to sell." "Then we'd better not fail," Emma said, and kicked Belle into a trot to chase down a cow trying to break from the herd. We made camp that first night by a creek I knew good water and enough grass for the cattle to graze. Emma helped me get them settled, then set about making camp with the same efficiency she brought to everything. Had a fire going in minutes, coffee brewing, beans and salt pork frying in the pan I'd brought. We ate in companionable silence, watching the sun paint the western sky in shades of orange and purple. The cattle were quiet, just the occasional low or rustle as they settled for the night. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes started their evening song. "You miss it?" Emma asked suddenly. "Miss what?" "Being married. Really married, I mean." Not this arrangement we have." I thought about it, trying to be honest. Missed having someone to talk to, I said. Missed not being alone all the time. But the rest of it, the expectations and the disappointments and the slow realization that you've trapped someone in a life they hate? No, I don't miss that. She nodded, poked at the fire with a stick. My husband used to say I talked too much, she said. Complained that I always had opinions about things that weren't my business. Her voice was matter-of-fact, like she was discussing the weather. After a while I learned to just stop talking. Easier that way. You don't talk too much, I said. I do now. She looked up at me, and in the firelight her eyes were darker, harder to read. Because you never told me to stop. Never hit me for having thoughts. It's strange getting used to that. The anger that flared in my chest was familiar by now. Every time Emma mentioned her first husband in that casual way, like abuse was just another fact of life, I wanted to ride to wherever he was and finish what she'd started. But that wouldn't help. Wouldn't change what had happened. You can say whatever you want, I told her. I might not always agree, might think you're dead wrong about something, but you've got a right to your thoughts, your words, your goddamn opinions. She smiled again, that same small transformation. I know, she said. That's why I stay. The words hung between us, weighted with meaning I wasn't quite ready to examine. Instead, I stood, checked the cattle one more time, made sure the horses were secure. When I came back to the fire, Emma had already rolled out her bedding on one side, left mine on the other with careful space between. We should sleep in shifts, I said. Keep watch. Just in case. In case of what, Wade? In case of anything. She nodded, settled into her blankets without argument. I took first watch, sitting by the dying fire with the rifle across my knees and my thoughts for company. The stars came out thick and bright, the way they only did out here away from town lights. Kate used to love the stars, used to make me point out constellations I only half remembered from school. But thinking about Kate while Emma slept 10 feet away felt wrong somehow, disloyal to both of them. So I thought about the drive instead. 2 more days to Fort Worth if we kept this pace. Sell the cattle, get supplies, head home. Simple. Except nothing involving Wade Harlan was ever simple, and he'd made it clear he wanted this drive to fail. The question was what he'd try. And when. Day 2 brought the answer. We were making good time, the cattle moving easy through country I knew. Emma had settled into the rhythm of it, no longer needing me to tell her what to do. She saw when a cow was about to stray and headed it off before I even noticed. Saw when the herd was bunching up too tight and spread them out without being asked. She was good at this, natural, and that small voice in the back of my head that sounded like Wade Harlan kept whispering, "Of course she is. She's already failed at everything else. She's got nothing to lose." I told that voice to shut up. Around noon we hit the river crossing. Not a big river, barely deserved the name this late in the season, but the current was faster than it looked, and the bottom was rocky. Cattle didn't like uncertain footing, made them skittish. I rode in first, let Red find the good path across. Turned back to signal Emma to start the herd moving. She nodded, started pushing them forward. The first few cows crossed fine. Then one in the middle hit a slick rock, stumbled, bawled in panic, and just like that, the whole herd balked. "Keep them moving," I called to Emma. "Don't let them bunch up or they'll never cross." She kicked Belle forward, rode right into the middle of the nervous cattle, using her presence to push them toward the water. It was brave, and it was stupid, and it was exactly what needed doing. But one cow, a contrary old heifer I'd been meaning to sell for 2 years, decided she'd had enough. Turned back, started pulling the others with her. Emma didn't hesitate. Rode Belle straight into the current, positioned herself between the heifer and the rest of the herd, forcing the old cow to choose between the water and a face full of horse. The heifer chose water, splashed through with an indignant bellow, the rest of the herd following because cattle are herd animals and they'll follow the leader even when the leader's an idiot. Emma followed them across Belle, picking her way through the current with careful feet. The water was up to the horse's chest in places, soaking Emma's skirts, but she stayed balanced, stayed calm, stayed in control. When she reached my side, dripping and grinning, I realized my heart was trying to beat its way out of my chest. "Don't ever do that again," I said, and my voice came out harsher than I meant. The grin faded. Do what ride into a river crossing alone? Could have been quicksand. Could have been a drop-off. Could have been any number of things that would have killed you. But it wasn't, she said. It was just water and rocks, and the heifer needed turning. I don't care what the heifer needed. I care that you're not Kate, and I can't. I stopped, took a breath. Can't watch another woman die because I brought her somewhere she shouldn't be. Emma's face softened, reached across the space between our horses, and touched my arm quick and light. I'm not Kate, she said quietly. I'm not going to die from getting wet. I'm not that fragile. I know, I said, but knowing and believing are two different things. Then believe this. She met my eyes, held them. I'm here because I choose to be, because this life, even the hard parts, is better than the alternative. You didn't trap me, Nathan. You gave me a way out. We rode on in silence after that, but something had shifted. Something in the way she sat her horse, the way I found myself checking on her more often, making sure she was there, still whole, still alive. That night we camped in a box canyon I'd used before, good shelter from the wind. Emma made coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in, and we sat watching the stars come out again. Tell me about Kate, Emma said. Real story, not the version you tell yourself to feel guilty. I almost said no, almost changed the subject. But there was something about the darkness, the isolation, the fact that we were two people alone in the middle of nowhere that made honesty easier. Met her at a dance in Dallas, I said. I was 26, she was 23. Prettiest girl in the room, and she chose to dance with me. Rough cowboy from nowhere, and she chose me. Why did she choose you? I shrugged. Novelty, maybe. I was different from the bankers' sons and merchants' boys she was used to. Represented adventure, excitement, something beyond the parlors and tea parties of Dallas society. And you? Why did you choose her? Because I was an idiot who thought pretty meant strong. Thought if a woman looked like an angel, she'd be able to handle anything. I stared into the fire, watching the flames dance. Brought her out here, and she cried for 3 days straight. Kept apologizing, kept saying she'd try harder. But some people aren't made for this life, and no amount of trying changes that. The pregnancy, Emma prompted gently, was her idea. Thought a baby would give her purpose, make the suffering worthwhile. She was so happy when she realized she was expecting. Started sewing little clothes, planning a nursery. Made me build that cradle you saw in the cellar. Emma was quiet for a moment. She didn't know it would kill her. Nobody knows that. You hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and sometimes the worst happens anyway. I looked up at the stars. Same stars Kate had loved. The labor started early. She said it was nothing, just practice pains. By the time I realized it was real, by the time I knew she needed help, it was too late. You rode for the doctor. 20 miles in spring rain with roads turned to rivers. Horse went lame halfway there. Had to shoot him, find another lost, another hour. Got back to find the baby stuck. Kate barely conscious. Doctor did what he could, but there was nothing to do by then except wait for the end. Emma moved closer, sat beside me instead of across the fire. Didn't say anything, just sat there in solidarity. The kind of comfort that doesn't try to fix, just acknowledges. Her last words were, "Find someone stronger," I said. Not "I love you," not goodbye. Just find someone stronger. Like she knew, like she'd been waiting 3 years to give me permission to try again. Maybe she was, Emma said. Maybe she knew this life required more than she had to give. Doesn't mean she was weak, just means she was honest. I'd never thought about it that way. Never considered that Kate's last words might have been a gift instead of an accusation. But Emma was right. Kate had looked at her own death and tried to save me from making the same mistake twice. The irony was, I'd tried anyway. Had sworn off women, sworn off marriage, sworn off anything that might lead to watching someone die. And then I'd sent for a bride because the ranch needed it, because survival trumped grief. And found Emma, who wasn't delicate or refined or any of the things I'd thought I wanted, who was exactly what I needed even though I hadn't known I needed it. Wade's men showed up during my watch around 2 in the morning. I saw them on the ridge, 3 riders silhouetted against the stars, too far to identify but close enough to send a message. We know where you are. We're watching. We're waiting. I didn't wake Emma, didn't see the point in both of us losing sleep, just sat there with the rifle ready watching them watch me until they got bored and rode off into the darkness. But I knew what it meant. Wade wasn't going to let us make this drive in peace. He'd try something. The question was what and when. The answer came the next day. We were pushing through a narrow canyon, the only route to Fort Worth that didn't add 2 days to the journey. High walls on either side, rocky ground underfoot, cattle nervous about the confined space. I'd made this crossing a dozen times, knew every twist and turn. What I didn't know was that Wade's men were waiting on the ridge above. The gunshots came sudden and loud, echoing off the canyon walls and turning into thunder. The cattle panicked instantly, went from nervous to terrified in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Stampede. 50 head of cattle trying to run in a space barely wide enough for them to walk, crushing each other against the walls, trampling the ones that fell mindless with fear and momentum. Emma. I yelled, but my voice was lost in the chaos. I spurred Red forward, trying to get to the front of the herd, trying to turn the leaders before they ran themselves and everyone else into the canyon wall. Through the dust and the noise, I caught glimpses of Emma on Bell riding hard toward the front like I was. She understood what needed doing without being told. Turn the leaders and the rest would follow. Let them keep running straight, and we'd lose half the herd to trampling and broken legs. I reached the front first, rode alongside the lead cow, and tried to force her left away from the dead end I knew was coming. But she was too panicked, couldn't see past her own fear. Then Emma was there, coming from the other side, the two of us boxing the lead cow in and forcing her to turn. The cow bawled and tried to fight, but Bell and Red were trained for this, knew how to hold position, even when the thing you're hurting outweighs you by half a ton. The leader turned. The others followed. The stampede curved, slowed, finally stopped as the cattle realized they weren't being chased anymore. I sat on Red, breathing hard, covered in dust and sweat. Looked over at Emma and found her in the same state. We locked eyes for a moment, and despite everything, despite the fear and the danger and the near disaster, she smiled. "We did it," she said. Then I saw the bodies. 3 cattle down, trampled in the panic. 2 more with broken legs that would have to be shot. 5 head lost out of 50. 10% of my income for the year gone because Wade Harlan wanted to prove a point. The rage that filled me was cold and sharp, different from the hot anger I'd felt before. This was calculated. This was Wade declaring war. His men rode down from the ridge, all false concern and helpful offers. "Heard gunshots," the foreman said. "Thought you might need help." I looked at him, at the rifle still in his hands, at the smirk he was trying to hide. "You heard gunshots," I said slowly. "Up on that ridge, where you just happened to be." "That's right." The foreman glanced at his companions. "Awful lot of gunshots. Must have been hunters or something. Or something," I agreed. My hand was on my own rifle. Would have been so easy to pull it to end this here and now. But Emma was watching, and I could feel her willing me to be smart, to think past the anger. "You tell Wade," I said carefully, "that if he wants my land, he can buy it legal. Not like this." The foreman shrugged. "Don't know what you mean, Cross. We're just being neighborly." They rode off, and I was left with 3 dead cattle and 2 more I had to shoot myself because leaving them to die slow would have been crueler than the bullet. Emma stood beside me while I did it. Didn't look away, didn't flinch. Just witnessed the way she'd witnessed everything else. When it was done, when the shots had echoed into silence and 5 of my cattle lay dead in the dust, she spoke. "He wants you angry," she said. "Wants you to do something stupid so he can claim self-defense or have you arrested. Don't give him that." "I know," I said, "but knowing doesn't make it easier." "No." She touched my arm again, that light contact that was becoming familiar. "But we're still here. We still have 45 head. We can still make this work." "At what cost?" I gestured at the bodies. "How many more will he kill before we reach Fort Worth?" How many more before he satisfied? Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she surprised me by laughing. It was a bitter sound, sharp-edged and tired. "You want to know something about men like Wade?" she asked. "About men who think they can break you just by taking things away. What, they're cowards. All of them. They can only hurt you if you let them. If you quit, if you run, if you give up. But if you keep going, if you take every hit and stay standing, eventually they realize they can't win. And cowards don't fight battles they can't win. That what you learned from your husband?" "No." She met my eyes. "That's what I learned from surviving him. We buried the cattle as best we could, dragged them off the trail so they wouldn't attract scavengers to where we'd pass coming back. Then we kept moving because staying still meant Wade had won, and I'd be damned if I'd give him that satisfaction." That night, camped under stars that seemed too bright and too far away, Emma told me the rest of her story. "My husband's name was William Hayes," she said. "We were married 3 years, like I told you. But what I didn't tell you was how those 3 years went. You don't have to—" I started, but she shook her head. "You told me about Kate. Fair's fair." She poked at the fire, watched sparks spiral up into darkness. "First year was all right. He worked in a mill, I kept house. We were poor but not starving. He wanted children. I wanted children. Seemed like that's what you did when you got married. But you couldn't. Month after month of nothing. At first, William was patient. Said these things took time. By the end of the first year, he was getting frustrated, asking what I was doing wrong, if I was taking precautions, without telling him if I even wanted his children. Second year?" Emma continued, her voice flat. "He started drinking more. Coming home angry. I'd do something wrong, forget to have dinner ready exactly when he wanted it, and he'd remind me that my one job was to keep house and give him heirs. Since I couldn't do the second, least I could do was manage the first. He hit you. Started with slaps, open-handed just to get my attention, he'd say. Escalated from there. By the third year he was using closed fists. Broke 2 of my ribs once because I burned his eggs. Jesus, Emma." She shrugged. "Could have been worse. He never hit my face, never left marks anyone could see. Made sure I knew it was my fault, that if I'd just been a better wife, given him what he wanted, he wouldn't have to discipline me." "That's not discipline," I said. "That's not even close to discipline. I know that now. Didn't know it then. Thought maybe he was right. Maybe I was failing at the one thing women were supposed to do." The fire crackled between us, punctuating her pauses. "Finally went to a doctor in Fort Worth. William didn't know I used egg money I'd been saving. Doctor examined me, ran tests, said there was no obvious reason I couldn't conceive. Sometimes, he said, these things just don't happen. But William didn't accept that. William took me to 3 more doctors. Each one said the same thing. By the 4th one, he was so angry he hit me right there in the doctor's office. Doctor threatened to call the law. William said he had every right to discipline his own wife, and the doctor let him." "The doctor was a man," Emma said simply. "Men understand each other. They don't understand women who can't do what they're meant for." I felt sick. Not just angry anymore, beyond that, into something darker and colder. "Go on," I said. "Not much more to tell." William decided if I couldn't give him children, I was worthless. Started talking about taking a second wife, said Mormons did it, and they seemed happy enough. I told him we weren't Mormons and I wasn't sharing him with anyone. He beat me so bad that time I couldn't walk for 3 days. "That's when you tried to kill him." "That's when I tried to kill him," she confirmed. "Waited until he was asleep, drunk, took his pistol, shot him in the shoulder. Meant to hit his heart, but my hands were shaking." She looked at her hands now, steady in the firelight. "Should have practiced more. They sent you to prison for attempted murder. 6 months at the work farm. Cotton picking, like I said. Learned a lot there. How to work through pain. How to keep going when you think you can't. How to survive men who think you're less than human. And after I had nothing. No husband, no family, no prospects. Worked odd jobs for a year, saved every penny. Saw Blackwood's advertisement for mail-order brides and thought, why not? Can't be worse than what I've already survived." She finally looked up at me, and in her eyes I saw something I recognized. The same stubborn refusal to quit that had kept me working this ranch for 3 years after Kate died. The same determination to survive even when survival seemed pointless. So when Wade tries to break us, she said, when he kills our cattle and threatens our livelihood and thinks he can make us quit, I just remember that I've survived worse. And I keep going. I didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to respond to that level of strength wrapped in such matter-of-fact delivery. So I did the only thing I could think of. Reached across the space between us and took her hand. She looked down at our joined hands, surprised. Then her fingers curled around mine, holding on. We sat like that until the fire burned low and the cold drove us to our separate bedrolls. But something had changed between us. Some wall had come down, some distance had closed. I lay awake for a long time after thinking about Emma's scars and Kate's ghost and the difference between choosing someone because they were beautiful and choosing someone because they were strong. Fort Worth appeared on the horizon, late afternoon of the fourth day, a sprawl of buildings and stockyards that represented civilization and commerce and everything the empty prairie wasn't. We pushed the 45 surviving cattle through the gates, got them penned, waited our turn with the buyers. The inspection didn't take long. Good cattle, the buyer said, running practiced hands over flanks and checking teeth. Little lean from the drive, but that's expected. I can offer you $17 a head. I did the math quick. 45 head at $17 each. $765. Should have been $850 if Wade hadn't killed 5. Should have been more if I'd had time to fatten them properly before the drive. But $765 was enough. Enough for winter supplies, enough for repairs, enough to keep going another year. Deal, I said, and we shook on it. The money felt heavy in my pocket as Emma and I walked through Fort Worth streets toward the general store. Other ranchers were celebrating in saloons, buying rounds, spending money they'd just earned on temporary comfort. A few called out to me, inviting me to join. I looked at Emma dusty and tired beside me. Could have left her at a boarding house gone drinking with the men, pretended for a few hours that I was still just a cowboy without complications. Instead I said, "We need supplies. Then we're heading back." "You can celebrate if you want," Emma said. "I'll wait." "Nothing to celebrate alone," I told her. The respect in her eyes was worth more than any whiskey. We spent 2 hours at the general store choosing carefully. Flour sugar salt coffee, seed for spring planting, new tools to replace the ones that had broken, fabric for clothes, though Emma insisted on practical calico, not anything fancy. At the fabric table, while Emma was examining different weights of cotton, I saw it. Yellow fabric with tiny blue flowers, almost the same pattern Kate had painted on the bedroom walls. Emma noticed me looking. "That's pretty," she said. "It is," I agreed. "Want it?" She shook her head. "Too impractical. Shows every speck of dirt." But I could see her looking at it again when she thought I wasn't watching. Could see the way her fingers traced the pattern just once before moving on to the brown and gray she'd actually buy. After she'd moved on to look at buttons and thread, I caught the shopkeeper's attention. 5 yards of the yellow," I said quietly. "And don't mention it when we're checking out." The shopkeeper, a woman who'd probably seen 1,000 men buying fabric for wives and sweethearts, just smiled and wrapped it separate. When we loaded up the wagon I'd rented for the trip back, I made sure the yellow fabric was buried under the other supplies where Emma wouldn't see it. A surprise for later when we were home, and she'd made this drive successful despite everything Wade had thrown at us. We camped one more night on the trail, the wagon heavy with supplies and our pockets lighter, but our prospects better. Emma made coffee and beans, the same meal we'd eaten for 4 days straight, and neither of us complained. "This wasn't so bad," Emma said, looking at the stars. "The drive, I mean. Despite the stampede and the dead cattle and Wade's men. You did good," I told her. "Better than good. Couldn't have made it without you." She glanced at me, surprised. "Really?" "Really. Most women would have quit after that river crossing. Would have demanded to go back, claimed it was too hard, too dangerous. You just kept going. Most women haven't had my practice at surviving things that are too hard." "Fair enough." I sipped my coffee, considered my next words carefully. "But you're not just surviving anymore, Emma. You're building something. We're building something." She was quiet for a long time. Finally, "What are we building, Nathan?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. but it's something neither of us could build alone. That much I know. The next morning we loaded up and headed home. The wagon was slow, slower than horses, but we were in no hurry. The cattle were sold, the money was earned, the worst was behind us. Or so I thought. Mrs. Brennan was waiting on our porch when we rolled in just before sunset. Her horse was tied to the rail, and she stood when she saw us coming, her face worried in that way that meant bad news. Nathan, she called as I pulled the wagon to a stop. Emma, thank the Lord you're back. What's wrong? I climbed down, helped Emma down after me. Mrs. Brennan wrung her hands, looked between us. I brought something I think you should have. But first I need to know, are you back for good? Both of you. We're back, Emma said. What is it? Mrs. Brennan went to her saddlebags, pulled out a leather-bound book I recognized even before she handed it to me. Kate's journal, the one I thought I'd left on the kitchen table. I found it when I was cleaning out Kate's things from the church sale, Mrs. Brennan said. Realized I'd never given it back to you after the funeral. Thought you might want it now, with Emma here and all. Emma took the journal from Mrs. Brennan with careful hands, looked at me for permission, and I nodded. It's all right, I said. You can read it if you want. Mrs. Brennan watched us both with shrewd eyes. You two seem different, she observed. The drive went well? Well enough, I said. Lost 5 head to a stampede but sold the rest for fair price. Wade's doing the stampede, can't prove it. But yes. She nodded like she'd expected this. He's been riding high while you were gone, telling everyone at church that you'd fail, that the drive would break you, that he'd be buying your land before winter. She looked at Emma. Said some unkind things about your new wife, too, about how she wouldn't last any longer than the first one. Emma's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed level. Let him talk. That's what I told the ladies' society. Some of them wanted to say something to Wade, tell him to keep a civil tongue. But I said no, let him talk. Words are just air. What matters is what you do. And what did we do? Emma asked. You came back, both of you, alive, together. That matters more than anything Wade Harlan can say. After Mrs. Brennan left, Emma and I stood on the porch in the gathering dark. She still held Kate's journal, hadn't opened it yet. Do you want to read it alone? She asked. No, I said. If you're going to read it, I should be there. We went inside, lit the lamp, sat at the kitchen table. The yellow fabric was still hidden in the supplies in the wagon, could wait until tomorrow. This couldn't. Emma opened the journal to the first page, started reading Kate's neat, careful handwriting out loud. We read through it together, taking turns when one of us needed a break. Read about Kate's hopes and fears, her loneliness, her desperate attempts to make herself fit into a life that didn't fit her. Read about the pregnancy, the joy that turned to terror, the growing certainty that something was wrong. The last entry was hardest. The one where Kate wrote about the baby being her last chance, her final attempt to matter in a place that had rejected her at every turn. When Emma finished reading, she closed the journal carefully, looked at me with wet eyes. She loved you, she said. In her way, she loved you. I know. But she couldn't live here. Couldn't be what this place needed. I know that too. Emma pushed the journal across the table toward me. You didn't kill her, Nathan. This land didn't kill her. She just wasn't meant for it, and that's nobody's fault. The guilt was still there, probably always would be. But Emma's words made it feel smaller somehow, less consuming. You're different, Emma said. Not better or worse than Kate, just different. You can survive this life because you've already survived worse, and that makes all the difference. I reached across the table, covered her hand with mine. So can you, I said. Survive it, I mean. We both can. She turned her hand over, laced her fingers through mine. Yes, she said simply. We can. We sat like that in the lamplight, hands joined across the table, while somewhere outside our window, Wade Harlan plotted and schemed and waited for us to fail. But we weren't going to fail. Not this time. Not with both of us fighting. The yellow fabric could wait until tomorrow. Tonight was for sitting here together and understanding that we'd survived Wade's first real attempt to break us, and we'd do it again, however many times it took. The sky turned wrong 2 days after we got back from Fort Worth. I'd seen plenty of Texas storms in my 33 years, knew the signs as well as I knew my own name. But this was different. The air pressed down heavy and wet, making it hard to breathe. The light went yellow-green, turning everything the color of old bruises, and the wind, when it came, tasted of metal and fear. Emma noticed it too. She was hanging laundry when the first gust hit strong enough to nearly tear the sheets from her hands. She looked at the horizon, then at me where I was working on the barn door, and I saw understanding in her face. How bad, she called. Bad enough, I said. Get inside. I'll secure the animals. The chickens knew something was coming. They huddled in their coop silent for once, no squawking or fussing. Just pressed together like they were trying to become one bird, one target instead of many. The cattle were restless, moving in tight circles, their eyes showing white. I got them into the near pasture close to the barn where they'd have some shelter. Then I started boarding windows, working fast, because the wind was picking up by the minute. Emma came out to help, despite my telling her to stay inside. We worked together, nailing boards across glass, securing anything that might fly away and become a weapon. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in the space between one hammer blow and the next. My breath started fogging. Then the hail came. Not rain. Ice. Chunks the size of walnuts hammering down from a sky gone black as midnight, though it was only 3 in the afternoon. One caught me on the shoulder, would have broken bone if I hadn't been wearing my heavy coat. Emma cried out as one hit her arm, but she kept working, kept nailing boards until we'd done all we could. Cellar, I said. Now. We grabbed what we could. Water bucket, lantern, the rifle, because you never knew. Emma had her carpet bag still packed from the cattle drive, like she was always ready to run. The thought stuck with me as we fought our way to the cellar door. The wind tried to rip it from my hands. I'm a strong man, stronger than most, but I had to put my full weight into holding it open while Emma ducked inside. Then I followed, pulling it shut behind us, just as something massive hit the house above. The sound was like artillery fire, like the world ending. The cellar was small and dark, and smelled of earth and potatoes. Emma lit the lantern with shaking hands while I secured the door from the inside. Not much of a lock, just a simple bolt, but it was all we had. Above us, the house was screaming. I've heard men scream, heard cattle scream, heard the sounds things make when they're dying, but I'd never heard a house scream before. Wood splintering, nails pulling free with shrieks of tortured metal, the roof tearing away in sections that sounded like bones breaking. Emma pressed close to me, not from affection, but from pure survival instinct. When you're this scared, you hold on to whatever's solid. I put my arm around her shoulders, felt her doing the same around my waist. We stood like that, braced against the back wall of the cellar, while above us, everything we'd built came apart. Then the roar started. It wasn't wind. Wind has rhythm, has breath, has pauses. This was constant, overwhelming, a freight train that never passed, never stopped, just kept coming and coming until I thought my eardrums would burst from the pressure. The cellar door rattled, held, rattled harder. The bolt started to bend. "Get down!" I yelled, though I could barely hear myself over the noise. We dropped to the floor, me covering Emma's body with mine, because that's what you do. That's what a man does when everything's ending and there's no way to stop it. Her arms came around me just as tight, both of us holding on like if we let go, we'd fly apart into nothing. The door exploded outward. The suction was immediate and terrible. Everything not nailed down started flying toward that opening, toward the black mouth of the tornado, trying to swallow us whole. The water bucket went first, then the carpet bag Emma had been carrying since the depot. Papers, tools, anything loose got sucked up and out. I grabbed the support beam with one hand, wrapped the other arm around Emma. Felt her hands fisted in my shirt, felt her face pressed against my chest. The pressure made my ears pop, my nose bleed. Couldn't breathe right, couldn't think, could only hold on and hope the beam would hold and we wouldn't be the next things to fly into that hungry darkness. Then, as sudden as it started, the roar moved on. The pressure released. The wind dropped from catastrophic to merely terrible. I could hear again, could breathe again. Could feel Emma shaking in my arms, or maybe that was me shaking, hard to tell where one of us ended and the other began. "Stay here," I said when I could talk. Her grip tightened. "No. Emma, it's not safe. Don't care." She pulled back enough to look at me, and her eyes were fierce despite the fear. Together or not at all. Remember, I remembered. Remembered her saying it in the river, remembered believing it even when I didn't want to. So we climbed out of that cellar together, ready to face whatever was left. Nothing. That's what was left. Nothing. The house had a roof when we'd gone into the cellar. Now it didn't. 2 walls were gone completely, just vanished like they'd never existed. The stove sat untouched in what used to be the kitchen, but the table we'd eaten at every day was nowhere to be seen. Kate's painted flowers on the bedroom wall were exposed to the sky, already fading in the dust and rain that was starting to fall. The barn was worse. Or rather, the barn wasn't. Where there should have been a structure, there was just the foundation and scattered lumber. The whole thing had been lifted up and carried away, dropped somewhere else to become someone else's problem. I stood there looking at it, at the ruins of everything I'd worked for, and something in my chest felt like it was caving in. The house could be fixed. Walls could be rebuilt. But the barn I'd built with my own hands over 2 months of hard labor, was just gone. "The chickens," I said, and my voice sounded hollow. Their coop was overturned but intact 20 feet from where it should have been. We could hear them inside squawking indignantly about the rough treatment. Alive then. The chickens had survived. I started laughing. Couldn't help it. The house was destroyed. The barn was gone. Everything I owned was scattered across 3 counties, and the damn chickens were fine. The laughter had a sharp edge to it, tasted like hysteria. But I couldn't stop. "Nathan," Emma said. "Nathan, look at me." I looked. She was covered in dust, had a cut on her forehead that was bleeding into her eye, her dress was torn. But she was standing. She was alive. She was here. "We're alive," she said. "The land is still here, the cattle, most of them. I saw them in the far pasture. We have our hands. We can rebuild." "With what?" I gestured at the wreckage. "We spent everything on supplies in Fort Worth. There's no money left for lumber, for nails, for any of it. This is done. We're done." She walked over to me, grabbed my face in both hands, forced me to look at her. "Listen to me," she said. "I've lost everything before. Had my whole life torn away and survived it. So have you. This," she waved at the destruction, "this is just wood and nails. It's not us. It's not what we've built together. What have we built, Emma? This was it. This was everything." "No," she said fiercely. "What we've built is this. U.S. partnership. The knowledge that we can survive anything because we've already survived everything. You chose me because I was strong enough to live through hell, so don't you dare give up now." She let go of my face, stepped back, started walking through the debris, sorting what could be salvaged, pulling boards that weren't broken, stacking them in piles, working like the world hadn't just ended, like there was still a point to any of it. And I stood there watching her. This woman who'd been returned like damaged goods, who'd survived a husband who beat her and a prison work farm, and standing alone on a platform while the world laughed. Watching her refuse to quit even when quitting was the only sensible option. That's when I understood what Kate had meant. Find someone stronger. Not stronger than Kate, stronger than me. Stronger than the disasters that kept trying to break us. I'd found her, and if she wasn't quitting, then neither was I. "Where do we start?" I asked. She looked up from the board she was examining, and the smile that crossed her face was like sunrise. "Right here," she said. "We start right here." We'd been working for maybe an hour, sorting salvage and trying to figure out what we could save when we heard the horse coming hard. Both of us tensed, reached for weapons that weren't there, relaxed slightly when we recognized the rider. Jack Brennan, the neighbor's boy. 15 years old and riding like all the demons of hell were on his tail. "Mr. Cross," he yelled before he'd even pulled his horse to a stop. "Mr. Cross, you gotta come. Father's trapped." The Brennan place was 2 miles east. The tornado had torn through there too, by the look of Jack's wild eyes and the blood on his shirt. How bad, I asked, already moving toward Red, who'd somehow survived in the far pasture. Bad. The house came down on him. Mama can't get him out, his legs are pinned. She sent me to find help, but everyone's dealing with their own damage, and you're the closest, and please, Mr. Cross, he's dying." Emma was already catching Belle, already swinging up without waiting for a saddle. "I'm coming too," she said when she saw me looking. "This isn't going to be pretty." "I know. That's why you need me." We rode hard, Jack leading the way. The devastation got worse as we went. The tornado had cut a path maybe 100 yards wide, and everything in that path was destroyed. Trees snapped like matchsticks, fences torn up and scattered, dead cattle and one dead horse, its legs broken at impossible angles. The Brennan place looked like something from a war zone. The house had been twisted half off its foundation, then dropped at an angle that made it look drunk. Most of the roof was gone. One wall had collapsed entirely, and under that wall we could hear Mr. Brennan screaming. Mrs. Brennan met us at what used to be the front door, her face streaked with dirt and tears. "Nathan," she said, and her voice broke on my name. "Nathan, I can't get him out. I've tried, but it's too heavy, and if I move the wrong board the whole thing will come down. Where is he?" She led us around to the side. Through a gap in the wreckage I could see Brennan. He was pinned from the waist down under a main support beam, conscious and in agony. When he saw us he tried to speak but could only manage a groan that sounded like it came from somewhere deep in hell. I assessed the situation with the part of my brain that could still think past the horror. The beam holding the house's remaining weight was the same beam crushing Brennan's legs. Move it wrong and the whole structure would collapse, probably killing him outright. But leave it, and he'd die slow from blood loss and shock. 3 of Wade Harlan's men were there too, standing back with tools in their hands, but making no move to help. Neighbors theoretically. In practice, just spectators waiting to see how this would end. "Been trying for an hour," the foreman said when he saw me looking. "Can't figure how to get him out without bringing the whole thing down on his head." "Then you haven't been trying hard enough," I said. "Easy for you to say, Cross. You got a better idea." "Yeah." I started examining the structure, looking for weak points and strong points, trying to see the solution before we started tearing things apart. "We shore up the sides first, build a tunnel, pull him out without shifting the main weight." "That's suicide," the foreman said. "Whole thing's unstable." "Then leave," I said flatly. "I didn't ask for your help, and I don't need your commentary." He looked at Wade's other men, shrugged. "Suit yourself. We'll be over here when it collapses on your head." Emma had already started dragging fence posts over the strongest pieces of lumber we could find nearby. "Jack," she said, her voice calm and authoritative in a way that made the boy respond instantly, "get more posts. You two," she pointed at Wade's men, "we need smaller boards for cross-bracing. Either help or leave, but stop standing around being useless." The men looked at her, at me, at the foreman who'd just been told off by a woman. Then, shamed into action, or maybe just curious to see what we'd do, they started helping. We worked fast. Every second counted, every moment. Brennan was under that beam, was a moment closer to death. Emma directed the placement like she'd done this before, and I realized she probably had. The mine cave-in back home, she'd said she'd seen this done. I just hoped she'd seen it done successfully. 30 minutes of careful work. Posts braced against posts, smaller boards wedged to distribute weight, everything tested twice before we trusted it. Mrs. Brennan knelt by the gap, talking to her husband, keeping him conscious, keeping him fighting. Finally, the tunnel was ready. Narrow, unstable, but ready. "I'm going in," I said. Emma grabbed my arm. "If it collapses." "Then you pull me out," I said. "Or you don't." Either way, we tried. I tied a rope around my waist, handed the other end to Emma and the men, crawled into the tunnel on my belly, dragging myself through space barely wide enough for my shoulders. The wood creaked above me. Dust rained down. Every inch felt like tempting fate, like asking the universe to crush me just to prove it could. But I kept going because Brennan was dying, and I was the only one small enough to fit through to where he was pinned. I reached him after what felt like hours but was probably minutes. His face was gray, his breathing shallow. When he saw me, his eyes focused briefly. "Kate?" he whispered. "Is that you, Kate Delirium?" We'd been neighbors, him and Kate had been friends. In his pain, he was seeing ghosts. "It's Nathan," I said. "I'm getting you out." I worked at the beam, pinning his legs, trying to shift it enough to pull him free. It was slick with blood, his blood, and I could see the damage even in the dim light. Both legs crushed below the knee. Even if we got him out, even if we saved his life, he'd never walk right again. But alive and crippled beat dead every time. On 3, I called back to Emma. "Pull steady. 1, 2, 3. They pulled. I pushed. The beam shifted maybe an inch, maybe 2. Brennan screamed a sound I'll hear in nightmares for the rest of my life. But his legs came free. I grabbed him under the arms, started dragging him back through the tunnel. The structure groaned, shifted. Boards cracked somewhere above us. Emma was yelling, "Pull, pull, pull," and I could feel the rope going taut as they hauled us toward daylight. We emerged just as the tunnel collapsed behind us. 1 second later, and we'd have been crushed. But we weren't. We were alive, and we had Brennan. He'd passed out from the pain, which was probably a mercy. I laid him on the ground as gently as I could, stepped back to let Emma take over. She was already moving, already assessing the damage with hands that knew what they were doing. "Both legs shattered below the knee," she said. "No major arterial bleeding yet, but that could change. We need the doctor." "Doctor's 20 miles away," Mrs. Brennan said. "Roads might not even be passable after the storm." Emma looked up at her, then at me, then at the men standing around watching. "Then I set them here," she said. "Won't be pretty, but it'll keep him alive until the doctor can get here. If he can get here." "You're not a doctor," Wade's foreman said. "No," Emma agreed. "But I've done this before, and he'll die if I don't try. Mrs. Brennan, your choice." Mrs. Brennan looked at her husband, unconscious and dying. "Do it," she said. What followed was brutal and efficient. Emma directing Jack to hold his father's shoulders, Wade's men to hold his hips, me positioned at the legs, ready to pull straight on her signal. She mixed carbolic acid with water, cleaned her hands, cleaned the wounds as best she could with what we had. On 3, she said, 1, 2, 3. I pulled. The bones straightened with a grinding sound that made my stomach turn. Brennan woke up screaming, thrashing against the men holding him. Emma worked through it, her hands steady, feeling the bones through destroyed tissue, guiding them back to where they belonged. The left leg went together clean. The right fought her, the bones too shattered to align properly. She had to break it again, reset it from scratch. By then, Brennan had passed out again, his body's mercy finally kicking in. She splinted both legs with boards and torn cloth wrapped them tight, elevated them on rolled blankets. When she sat back, her hands were shaking, but her work was done. "Will he live, Mrs.?" Brennan asked. "Maybe," Emma said. "If infection doesn't set in, if the bones heal straight, if we're lucky." Her voice was clinical, detached, but her hands were still shaking. "Keep the wounds clean, carbolic acid twice a day. Don't let him try to walk for at least 2 months. And pray." Mrs. Brennan grabbed Emma's bloody hands, held them tight. "You saved him," she said. "You saved my husband." "We'll see," Emma said. "Check back in a week." But Mrs. Brennan wasn't listening to caution. She pulled Emma into a fierce hug, this proper frontier wife, embracing the mail-order bride everyone had gossiped about. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." Wade's foreman was staring at Emma with something like respect. "That was," he started, then stopped. "That was impressive, ma'am." Emma just nodded, too tired for words. We rode back to our destroyed ranch in the last light of day. Neither of us spoke. What was there to say? We'd saved a man's life but lost everything we owned. The math didn't balance, but then it never did. At the ruins of our house we stood looking at what remained. Not much. Enough to survive maybe if we were very lucky and very determined. "I need to tell you something," I said. Emma turned to look at me, waiting. "Wade came by while you were inside earlier, before the storm, made me an offer, to buy the land." "To buy the land," I confirmed. $2,000. Fair price, really. More than fair, considering what it looks like now. He'd let us stay for 6 months, then we'd move on. Find something easier, something that doesn't keep trying to kill us. "Are you considering it?" Her voice was carefully neutral. I admitted. Standing here looking at this, yeah, I was considering it. thinking maybe Wade's right. Maybe I can't do this. Maybe it's time to admit defeat and move on. And now I'm thinking about something you said in the cellar, about how what we've built isn't the house or the barn, it's us, the partnership. I looked at her, this woman who'd reset a man's shattered legs with her bare hands, and I'm thinking that if you can do that, if you can face down that kind of horror and not quit, then I can face down Wade Harlan. So you're saying no to his offer. I'm saying hell no to his offer, I corrected. This land is mine. Was mine when Kate died, and I wanted to die with it. Still mine after the tornado. Will be mine until they put me in the ground next to her. And Wade Harlan can choke on that. Emma smiled. It was tired and small, but it was real. Good, she said, because I wasn't planning on leaving. Even after all this, I gestured at the destruction, especially after all this. She stepped closer, looked up at me in the fading light. You think I don't know what it's like to have everything taken from you, to lose it all, and have to start from nothing? I've done it before, Nathan. I can do it again. We can do it again. I don't want a business partner anymore, I said. The words came out before I could stop them, before I could think about whether it was the right time or the right place. Emma went very still. What do you want? I want my wife. Real wife. True wife. I took her hand, felt the calluses and scars that matched my own. I want the woman who rides into rivers to turn stampeding cattle, who sets broken legs without flinching, who stands in ruins and talks about rebuilding like it's already done. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, you already have her, she said. You've had her since the depot. Just took you this long to notice. We stood there holding hands while the last light died and the stars came out. Above us, through the holes in what used to be our roof, the sky was clear and bright and full of promise. Tomorrow we'd start rebuilding. Tomorrow we'd face Wade's fury when he learned we'd said no. Tomorrow would bring all the problems we didn't have solutions for yet. But tonight, we had each other. And that it turned out was enough. The next morning brought neighbors. I woke to the sound of wagons, looked out through the hole where our bedroom wall used to be, and saw them coming. 5 wagons, maybe 6, loaded with lumber and tools and supplies. Mrs. Brennan drove the first one, her daughter Lily beside her. Behind them came farmers and ranchers. I barely knew people we'd helped during the storm or who'd heard about Brennan and decided we were worth saving. Wade Harlan's foreman was there too. He climbed down from his wagon without meeting my eyes. We're here to help rebuild, Mrs. Brennan announced. It's what neighbors do. Over the next 2 days the barn went up. Not as big as the old one, not as fancy, but solid and functional. The men worked on the frame while the women organized food and supplies. Emma and Mrs. Brennan ran the operation like generals, directing traffic and settling disputes and making sure everyone had what they needed. Wade's foreman pulled me aside on the second day. Got something to say, Cross? I'm listening. Boss isn't going to like this. Us helping you. He wanted you to fail. I know what he wanted. Yeah, well. The foreman shifted uncomfortably. Thing is, we saw what your woman did for Brennan. Saw you risk your neck to pull him out. That kind of thing matters out here. Matters more than what Wade wants. You saying you're switching sides? I'm saying I'm done being his eyes and ears, done reporting every move you make. He can come spy on you himself if he cares that much. The foreman looked at the barn rising behind us. You earned this cross, you and your wife. Don't let Wade take it from you. He walked away before I could respond, left me standing there trying to process what had just happened. Wade was losing his grip on the people around him, losing them because they'd seen Emma and me fight and survive, and that mattered more than money or intimidation. By the end of the second day, the barn was up and half the house was repaired. We'd have a roof again soon, walls to keep out the cold. The lean-to where Emma had slept those first weeks was gone, destroyed in the tornado. But we didn't rebuild it. Don't need it anymore, Emma said when Mrs. Brennan asked. 1 bedroom is enough. The older woman smiled knowingly, but said nothing. On the 3rd day, Wade came himself. He rode up on that flashy Palomino, took in the new barn, and the neighbors working on the house. His face went dark, then darker, when he saw his foreman handing me a board. Cross, he said. Need a word. I'm busy, I said. Rebuilding my house. You know, the one the tornado destroyed. That's what I need to talk to you about. My offer still stands. Might even improve it considering the circumstances. Not interested. You haven't heard the new terms. Don't need to. I'm not selling. Wade dismounted, walked over to where I was working, lowered his voice so only I could hear. You're being a fool, he said. That tornado was a message. This land doesn't want you here. Nature itself is trying to drive you off. How many more signs do you need? Nature doesn't send messages, I said. Nature just is, and I'm still here. For now. But winter's coming. You've got half a house and a new barn and no money left for supplies. How are you going to feed that wife of yours when the snow comes? How are you going to keep her warm when you're burning furniture to stay alive? I'll manage. You'll fail. Wade's voice was flat, certain. And when you do, when you're desperate and starving, and that woman you brought here is suffering because of your pride, you'll come to me. You'll beg me to buy this worthless piece of dirt. And I'll pay you half what I'm offering now. Then I guess you'll be waiting a long time, I said. Wade looked past me to where Emma was working with the other women organizing supplies. His eyes narrowed. That woman, he said, she the reason you're being stubborn? Think she's going to save you Emma's. The reason I'm still standing, I said, but you wouldn't understand that. You've never built anything that didn't come from taking it away from someone else. Wade's hand went to his gun. For a moment I thought he'd actually do it, actually draw on me in front of all these witnesses. But he wasn't that stupid. Instead, he smiled, that skull grin that had no warmth in it. Fine, he said. Keep your land. Work yourself to death on it. Watch that woman break just like the last one. When it all comes down, when you finally admit you can't win, I'll be waiting. And Cross. The price just went down to $1,500. He rode off, leaving me standing there with my hands clenched and murder in my heart. Emma came over after he'd gone, saw him talking to you, she said. What did he want? Same thing he always wants, for us to fail so he can buy cheap. And what did you tell him? I told him to keep waiting. She nodded, satisfied. Good, because we're not failing. Look around, Nathan. Look at what we've built in 3 days. I looked. The barn was done. The house was taking shape. 20 people working because they believed in something in us, in the idea that helping your neighbors mattered more than serving a rich man's greed. We're not alone anymore, Emma said. That's what Wade doesn't understand. He thinks power comes from money and land and intimidation. But real power comes from community, from people choosing to stand with you. That night, after the neighbors had gone home and we were alone in our partially rebuilt house, Emma and I lay in the one bedroom we'd constructed first. Through the window I could see stars, could hear the night sounds of the ranch settling back into normalcy. Nathan, Emma said in the darkness, I need to tell you something. My stomach tightened. Nothing good ever started with those words. What is it? Remember what the doctor said? About me being barren, about how I couldn't have children? Yeah. He was wrong. The words didn't make sense at first. I rolled over to look at her, tried to see her face in the starlight. What do you mean wrong? I mean, I'm pregnant, she said. 3 months along, near as I can figure. Must have happened right after we got back from Fort Worth. The world tilted. I sat up, heart hammering. You're sure? Emma sat up too, took my hand, placed it on her belly where I could feel the slightest swell. I'm sure. Terror and joy crashed together in my chest, made it hard to breathe. But Kate, the baby, she died. I know, Emma said gently. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But Nathan, I'm not Kate. I'm stronger. My body's been through hell and survived. I can do this. What if something goes wrong? What if I lose you? Then you lose me. But we don't get to choose that. We only get to choose whether we try. I sat there with my hand on her belly, feeling the future growing. There, feeling everything I thought I knew rearrange itself. A child, our child, the family I'd given up hoping for. I can't lose you, I said, voice rough. I can't bury another wife. You won't, Emma said with certainty I wished I felt. I'm not going anywhere. I survived everything to get here to have this. I'm not dying now. We held each other in the darkness, 2 people who'd survived too much to die, now making promises we hoped we could keep. The months that followed were hard but hopeful. The house got finished better than it had been before. Tighter, warmer, built with help from people who cared. The cattle that survived the tornado became 50 head, then 60, as we found strays and bought a few more with credit from the bank. Wade's drought came that winter, same as every winter, but we had water from our creek and supplies we'd planned for. Watched Wade's cattle die of thirst while ours drank deep, watched his empire start to crack while ours grew stronger. Emma's belly grew with it. By December she was showing clear. By January she couldn't hide it if she tried. Mrs. Brennan came by often bringing advice and supplies and the kind of practical help that frontier women gave each other. Lily came too sweet on young Jack, who'd been sneaking over to help with chores and make eyes at her. Love blooming in the next generation, the cycle continuing. In February, Wade Harlan's bank foreclosed on his land. Overextended himself trying to expand too fast, spent money he didn't have on cattle that died in the drought. Everything he'd built on greed and intimidation came crashing down, and the bank sold his land in pieces to cover his debts. I thought about buying his water rights, the ones he'd wanted mine for. Thought about it and decided against it. Didn't need an empire, just needed enough. Greed destroyed him, Emma said when she heard. Won't destroy us. In March, Mr. Brennan walked again for the first time since the tornado, with a cane and a limp that would never fully heal, but he walked. Came by to thank Emma again, to show her that her work had saved not just his life, but his ability to work his own land. You gave me back my future, he said. Emma, 7 months pregnant and glowing with it, just smiled. We all did that for each other, she said. In April, on a night when the stars were bright and the air smelled of spring rain coming, Emma went into labor. I rode for the doctor this time. Roads were good, horse was fast, and I made it there and back in 3 hours instead of 5. The doctor came, set up in our bedroom, sent me outside to wait, because that's what men did while their wives gave birth. I paced the porch like a caged animal, listening to Emma's cries through the window. Every scream felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Every moment of silence felt like the end of the world. Mrs. Brennan found me there after midnight, put a hand on my arm. She's strong, Nathan. She's going to be fine. Kate was strong too, I said. Wasn't enough. Kate was city strong. Emma's frontier strong. There's a difference. 3 hours of labor. 3 hours of me dying outside while Emma fought for life inside. Then just before dawn, a new sound. A baby crying. The doctor opened the door, smiling. Got yourself a Sun Cross. Healthy, loud, and mean as a rattlesnake. Mother's doing fine. You can come in. I walked into that bedroom on legs that didn't quite work right. Found Emma propped up against pillows, sweaty and exhausted, and holding a squirming bundle that was making impressive amounts of noise. She looked up when she saw me, and her smile was pure triumph. See, she said. Told you I wasn't dying. I sat on the edge of the bed, looked at my son, at my wife, at the family I'd thought I'd lost the right to have. He's perfect, I managed. He's loud, Emma corrected. But yes, he's perfect. You want to hold him? I took the baby, awkward and scared of dropping him. He was so small, so fragile. But he had Emma's eyes, my stubborn chin and lungs that suggested he'd be fine on the frontier. What should we call him? Emma asked. I thought about it. Thought about Kate and the baby who'd never had a name. Thought about starting fresh, about honoring the past without being haunted by it. Jacob, I said. After my grandfather, man who taught me everything about ranching, about not quitting when things get hard. Jacob Cross. Emma said, trying it out. I like it. She touched the baby's hand, watched his tiny fingers curl around hers. Welcome to the world, Jacob. You were born into a family that doesn't quit. The years that followed proved her right. We didn't quit. Didn't quit when Jacob got colic and screamed for 3 months straight. Didn't quit when the next drought came and we lost 10 head of cattle. Didn't quit when Emma got pregnant again, had our daughter Rose 2 years later, then our youngest son Samuel 2 years after that. 3 children on a ranch that had seemed too hard for one man. 3 kids running through rooms where Kate's painted flowers still bloomed on the walls, a reminder of the past that didn't haunt us anymore. Just part of the story, part of the journey. Wade Harlan moved east last I heard. Took what little money he had left and tried to start over in Louisiana. Never heard if he succeeded. Didn't much care. The Brennans became family in the way frontier neighbors did. Jack married Lily when they turned 18, started their own ranch on land their fathers helped them buy. The next generation building their own dreams, and us, Emma and me, we built an empire. Not through greed or taking from others, but through work and partnership, and refusing to give up when giving up would have been easier. I'm 65 years old now, sitting on the porch of the house we rebuilt 33 years ago. The ranch has grown to 300 acres. The main house is bigger 2 barns instead of 1 fences that run straight and strong in all directions. My grandson James sits beside me 12 years old and full of questions. He's Rose's boy, has her mother's eyes and his grandfather's stubbornness. So Grandma Emma was the one nobody wanted, he asks. That's what they thought, I say. They were fools. Emma comes out with coffee, still strong enough to strip paint after all these years. She's 61 now, hair gone gray, but back still straight, hands still capable. She hands me my cup, touches my shoulder in passing. The casual intimacy of 3 decades together. You telling our story again, she asks. Boy needs to know how his grandmother saved my life. Emma smiles. I think it was mutual. James looks between us, trying to understand. But Grandpa, he says the doctor said she couldn't have children. And Mama and Aunt Rose and Uncle Samuel are right there. He points at our 3 grown children working the ranch in the distance. Doctors are wrong sometimes, I say. Your grandmother's proved a lot of people wrong over the years. Emma sits beside me, takes my free hand in hers. We watch the sun set over land we've built together, land that tried to kill us and failed, land that became home because we refused to let it be anything else. You want to know the secret, I ask James, the secret to building something that lasts. James leans forward eager. What? Choose the right partner, I tell him. Not the pretty one, not the easy one, the right one. Someone who'll stand when others run, someone who'll work when others quit, someone who'll fight beside you, not behind you. Emma squeezes my hand. You telling him about the depot? Got to, I say. Boy needs to know the truth. That his grandmother was the last one standing when everyone else had been chosen, that I picked her when she was the only one left, that everyone thought I was crazy or desperate or both. Were you, James asks. Crazy or desperate? Both, probably, I admit. But mostly I was smart enough to recognize strength when I saw it. Your grandmother had been tested by fire. She'd survived things that would have killed softer people. That's what I needed. Not someone who looked good on my arm. Someone who could survive the life I had to offer. Emma looks at me with those eyes that haven't changed, that still see through to the truth underneath. And what life was that? Hard work, I say. No guarantees. Every day a fight to keep what we'd built. But we had each other, so we won more fights than we lost. Most fights, Emma corrects. We lost plenty. But we never lost each other, I say. That's what counts. James is quiet for a moment, processing. Then Grandma. Were you scared on that platform when everyone else got picked and you were alone? Emma considers the question. Scared number. I'd been scared before. Real scared, the kind that makes you want to die rather than keep living. Standing on that platform wasn't scary. It was just another day of being told I wasn't good enough. But you were good enough, James protests. No, Emma says gently. I was better than good enough. I was exactly what your grandfather needed, even though neither of us knew it yet. See, being chosen means someone picked you because they had options. Being seen means someone recognized your worth when nobody else could. Your grandfather saw me, and I saw him. She looks at me, and I see the whole journey in her eyes. The depot, the cattle drive, the tornado, the rebuilding. The children we'd had despite doctors saying we couldn't. The empire we'd built from ashes and stubbornness. We both got seen, I say. Finally. The sun sinks below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Our children are heading in from their work, calling to each other, their voices carrying on the evening air. 3 generations on this land now, all because a desperate man chose a woman nobody wanted, and she chose him right back. They called her the one nobody wanted, I tell James. Turns out she was the one everyone needed, including me, especially me. Emma's fingers tighten around mine. We sit there as the stars come out, 2 old people who've survived everything the world threw at them and came out stronger for it. The ranch stretches around us, solid and prosperous, and earned through blood and sweat and refusing to quit. This is what we built, I think. Not just land and cattle and buildings, but family, legacy, proof that broken people can make something whole if they're willing to work at it. Behind us, the house glows with lamplight. Inside, our children are preparing dinner, arguing good-naturedly about something trivial. Their children, our grandchildren, run between their legs, full of energy and noise and life. All of this started with a woman standing alone on a platform while the world laughed. Started with me choosing her when she was the last one left. Started with both of us being brave enough to try again after we'd failed before. The best love stories I've learned don't start with perfection. They start with 2 people choosing to build something beautiful from the wreckage of their separate disasters. They start with honesty instead of romance, with respect instead of passion, with partnership instead of promises. They start with someone seeing you when everyone else looks away. Emma Hayes became Emma Cross 33 years ago today. And every day since, she's proven that being the one nobody wanted just meant I was the only one smart enough to see what I was getting. The best decision I ever made was choosing the woman everyone else rejected. The second best was listening when she chose me right back.